Okay, so let us hope that this will now catch up and we can see what we're doing. Always a good idea. Let's try again, see if this will. Pick up. Excellent. So I'm not so sure what's happening with my computer again this evening, but hey ho, that seems to be a regular activity for me. Wonderful, I have found you. I don't understand because I'm going to turn my camera, so forgive me if you go a bit sick while I do that. Facebook is doing its usual to me and upsetting the apple cart as to what it's doing, because that's just what it seems to do. When I do it in my own trial group, it nicely produces what I want as I'm expecting it, and then it decides that it's not going to when I go live. Hey ho, that's life. Good evening, Sarah. I hope you're well. And that things are good for you and you're enjoying your crafting, and the children at school are also good. We're a little before 7 o'clock, which is when I said I would go live, so we will just wait a few minutes. We've got, according to this, about 5 people who've joined us at the moment. But we will wait until 7 because that's the time I said I was going to do the live, and I think that's polite for everyone who might be joining us a little bit later or running on time. Good evening, Elaine. Thank you for joining us. It's lovely to see you. I do think that Facebook's having a dicky fit today. It's not feeding through the live comments for me onto my screen, which is never a great thing. So I do apologise if I don't see what's going on. Hi Gloria, thank you very much for your kind words about my makes for Dali. I love working with her papers. They are beautiful to work with and never fail to inspire me to create things, and I'm very lucky that she asked me to help her out, and it's a pleasure always doing things for friends. Hi Julie, thank you for joining us. Good evening, IoT. You may have chosen not to do this, IoT, but it's Vasilis's birthday party today, and I think he was expecting you in the group. It's on at the moment. I've carefully managed to double book myself, but that's life. So I just thought I'd remind you in case you'd forgotten. But I'd love to have your company with me this evening. That's lovely for you to want to spend some time with me. More than happy for you to do that at any stage. It is just lovely to see people wanting to see what I'm up to. There we are. So good. Okay. So we're almost at 8 o'clock. So that's always a good thing. Even at 7 o'clock, I don't want to put the fear of God into anyone if they're meant to be putting children to sleep or to bed even. As I've misquoted that time then. Good evening, Amanda. Thank you very much for your for taking the time to join us this evening. I will start promptly at 7. I'm not very keen on showing my face. It's not my best feature, and I also don't like the feeling of being seasick when cameras are moved about. So forgive me if I appear rude from doing that, but I think the most important thing is that we actually show the projects that we're making and going to be playing with today. Okay, so if that's good, then that would be lovely. Ioti, thank you for liking the little book. I sort of did this last night. I wasn't so sure about it. Had the products out that I was going to play with today. Thought about it overnight. Woke up and was happy with the product I'd made overnight. Added some extra words. But we're going to do something a little bit different today. I'm going to be using a beautiful rice paper by Paper Designs. It's an Italian company, so it's great quality rice paper. And also I'm going to be using the new Pentart Vibrant Chalky paints, which have hit at least one of the two UK stores, in fact. And I'm not going to name them because that wouldn't be fair and it's against the group rules, but there are two companies now that have them available in the UK. I have done a little bit of prep because actually you don't really need to see me slapping paint on lots of surfaces of lots of boxes, and also because actually I've got some steps that need to be dried and preferably naturally to get the best results. So I'm going to swap this box out for the box lid. And then talk you through the top bit of it before I do anything else. Now, this is actually a paper box. They're relatively easily obtained, but I find if I just put paint on them directly, then the surface of them tends to bobble, and so my preference is to apply bonding primer to them rather than just going on with a gesso. If gesso is what you've got, then it will work. Just be careful not to oversaturate it and build up thin layers. The bonding primer is actually really thin, and whilst you can put it on with a paintbrush, you tend to get quite an irregular area, and so I tend to use a sponge and just recycle these. As you can see, this one's well loved. So having done that, I let it dry. And this is for the surface of the box. It's important that you have a colour that's going to allow your rice paper to pop off it when it's applied. And I have literally just added a thin layer of ivory coloured acrylic paint to achieve the look that I was wanting. Okay, and that's partly because actually I'm using an antique styled paper, and therefore it wasn't going to be a problem to have an ivory base as opposed to a white base, and my rice paper was going to be very obviously evident through it. So what am I going to do? The first thing to say is that we need to work out where we're going to put this, and I felt it was preferable to have the whole of the word on my rice paper rather than lose a part of the butterfly rather than anything else. And I'm just going to mark along the sides of my papers as to where I want to be, because that makes life easy, and then I can cut that up. So I'm just going to line my paper up with the bottom. I can line that up with there. That will give me a line that's approximately straight, and then I can cut down the other side. Excuse me for wobbling around a bit. I want that to be straight, and yes, I am eyeballing it slightly, but that doesn't matter because I can trim it afterwards. So there we are. I'd rather have a bit more than I need than a bit less and have to deal with a shortfall of it. Now, one of the nice things about the Paper Designs rice papers is that they really are quite thick. I have no idea what GSM they are, but I suspect it's at least 30, possibly a bit more, and it actually means that and as I want straight edges and I'm not trying to disguise them for this project, I'm just going to cut it with a nice sharp pair of scissors. some of the very fine rice papers are actually quite difficult to cut with a pair of scissors, so it does pay to have a nice thick one. You can see in this paper all of the slubs of material, mulberry fibres that are there, which again I think helps with the integrity of it. So, having drawn myself some lines, hopefully I can see down it. It's always helpful if you can see what you're doing, I think. And we're just going to chop that up so that we've got a piece that will work and fit the top of the box. I have done some more on the sides of the box lid, but I'm going to repeat a lot of that on the sides. So the aim of this bit at the moment is literally just to get the products, the pieces I need on for drying on, so that I can then carry on with some of the repetitive tasks whilst the glues and the mediums are drying. So I've actually got a very well loved bottle of decoupage varnish and glue, and I'm deliberately choosing a matte version today. It's by Pentart, and it also acts as a glue as well as a protective coat. And all I'm going to do is pop a layer on over my top of my box lid, making sure I've got a coverage over everything. I don't really want thick blobs, so I'm going to spread that out. You really don't need to have lots of glue for rice paper. It will soak through quite well. There we are. But I do think it's important to get a coverage over everything. Otherwise, that's when you tend to find that you end up with air bubbles. And to make my life easier, I'm just going to line it up at the bottom, pop it in place, smooth it up, and that's not fitting very nicely. So I'm going to lift it up a little bit. I really might well not have cut it completely square, but there we are. And this way I actually don't have lots of air, lots of bubbles, and I have got a little bit of edge that I will need to trim, but that's not going to matter. Now, left to normal devices and not alive, I would absolutely wait and trim that before I do anything else. But there we are. Such is the joys. It's important that rice paper is sealed in place, because otherwise it's a very thin surface and you'll find that it doesn't withstand wear and tear of every life. And as I'm making a box, hopefully it'll be functional. I felt it was quite important to protect my layers, and it also means that if I want to add anything else over the top, then I can do so without it adversely affecting my papers. Okay, so I hope that makes sense to everyone. I hope that everyone else is happy with what's going on. I love these rice papers from Paper Designs. They're available in the UK in multiple sets, so there are others in the design group, and they're beautiful to work with. Now then, I'm going to pop that into some water, and I am going to give this a quick blast because I want to pick it up. So I'm sorry about the noise, because actually using a heat gun is an integral part, I think, of doing a live project, because you can't short circuit every step along the way. So I apologise for that, but it will let me, while I generally waft this over, catch up with some of the comments that you've made. Hello to Kim from South Africa. It's lovely to see you joining us from so far away. I hope that everything is good out there for you. I'm glad you like the rice paper, Diane. They are beautiful rice papers. Whilst this is drying, I can just grab a couple of other ones that come in the set that I bought this one with. So this is another one of the rice papers from this same company. So clearly it's got a smaller image and some even tinier images. And these are great for putting onto bottles and decoupaging onto other surfaces, not necessarily boxes. And the large one, the second large one, is just equally stunning. And I've got a plan for that, but that means I can use the whole of the design rather than just chopping a part of it up. So there we are. So I can now handle that reasonably safely without burning fingers. So I'm going to do the next step, and as I say, I have done other things on the sides of this box. Don't worry about it. I will come tell you on the main boxes what's going on. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Pentart crackling gel. Now this is a 2-component crackling gel, and it's, for me, it's better if it's left to dry naturally, although you can heat set it if you want to. So I'm going to apply the first step and then put my project aside to dry for as long as possible on its own. And then we'll add the second layer in between, altering the rest of it. You can see how well loved this is. I've actually got 2 pots of the step 1. If you only have the Stamperia 1-step crackle, it will work fine on surfaces like this, where I'm just using it as on a painted surface. But if you put it onto a paper surface and you haven't sealed that surface first, then what you'll find is that the cracks will crack beautifully, but they will pull the colour off your paper. So you'll get a very crazy paved effect. It's actually a very beautiful effect, but if it's not the one that you're wanting, then you might be disappointed and feel that you've spoiled your paper. So that's why my preference is to use the Pentart 2-step crackle medium. I just find it that I can use it in any of the circumstances, and I don't have to worry, even though it does mean there's an additional step along the way. For me, it's just what works, and ultimately that's what you need to find, isn't it, for yourself, is products that work for you, that do what you want them to do when you're wanting, when you're crafting. I don't find it too much of a chore, particularly not in the weather that we've had over the last few days, to to put a base layer down. It does improve the longevity of the crackles, and as I say, it protects the surface as well. So for me, it's a step that's absolutely worth it. Doesn't matter how you put this on. The direction of your brush strokes don't affect the direction of the crackle. I know that for some other crackle products it can do, but this one is. It doesn't really matter. So again, that makes it easy to use for people. There we are. So we've now got a layer of that all over that, and I'm going to pop that down so that can dry naturally for as long as possible. That can go in there. That pot can go in the bin. So what is our next step? Our next step is to cover the base of the box. Okay, so again, I've added a layer of bonding fluid. Now then, Pentart have brought out beautiful, vibrant chalky paints, and the normal chalky paints I find I can cover with just 1 layer of paint. However, I think to get the vibrancy of the colour set against the chalk that's in the paint, they've had to reach a compromise. And for me, 1 coat results in not great coverage. You can clearly see that it's not great. And 2 coats results in that. And 3 a better coverage. And again, I do think it's worth the time to add lots of thin layers of paint rather than one great big thick layer. If I applied a really thick layer, I'm sure I might well have got one coverage, but actually, again, I think if you want a nice finish overall, you're better off adding lots of thin layers. They dry better, they seal better, they bond to each other, and that gives your piece longevity. Whereas if you try to rush or short circuit this, all that happens is that after a while your paint starts to wear off, or worse than that, it becomes chipped. So for me, if I'm making a project, I like just to spend the time to get a really nice finish with what I'm doing. And as you can, I don't know how well it's showing, but for me, even 2 layers has not given me the coverage that I would really be happy with. So there we are. So I'm just going to add another layer to this side. And I'm going to work on the sides that is completely dry with the multiple layers, just to build up the techniques for you. Because, again, as I say, much as it's all very well watching paint dry and kettles boil, I think you know how to paint, and you don't really need to see me spending the best part of an hour adding lots of layers of paint to a box, when I can do that ultimately off camera and finish the project before posting a finished box with all of the sides completely decorated. So is that okay? So has anyone else got anyone have any questions for at the moment, or are we all happy? There we are. Now, because I know that I'm a bit of a numpty, I am going to give the paint that I've done a little bit of a whiz dry, because otherwise I am sure to put my fingers in it. And the paint is fine to heat gun dry, but again, do be careful not to overheat it, because it will bubble, and again, that's not the look I'm going for. There are ways of correcting it, but it's easier usually just to be a little bit more patient. And if I wasn't here doing this live, I would just be actually leaving it to set naturally and dry on its own without having to add anything to it. So let me do that. That's its other side that I painted, because I'm sure his eggs is likely to put that side down at some point and then get it stuck to the counter, which will not be a great look. So there we are. And I don't know, my computer isn't feeding me the live comments as they come through, which isn't very helpful. So I'm relying on being able to look up and see my phone. And a combination of being short-sighted and the phone being set at resistance doesn't help with me necessarily doing that. But there we are. Right, so I want to now think about how I'm going to link my box base to my rice paper, because we want a look that's cohesive. And whilst this has got an obvious manuscript in it, it looks like maybe as if there is a very faint text script in the background, and you could, with an eye of faith, think that some of these areas are perhaps more splodges rather than music. So I have a couple of stamp sets here that I'm going to use. I have a text stamp from one of the companies, but any text stamp will work perfectly well. She says, having dropped it and covered it all in dirt. And I have an archival ink in ground espresso and also one in acorn. So we're just literally going to add some random areas of stamping. You can see that I'm adding first, second, third, fourth, whatever generations. I'm not worried about that. I am trying to keep the text so it's reasonably parallel, but again, I'm not getting overly hung up with that. And of course, I would do all 4 surfaces, but as they're not fully painted, I'm going to move to the next one. And the next stamp is actually a splodge stamp. It's this one here. So because I think we could probably get away with that as this. And I'm not bothering putting it on a block. I'm just adding random areas or splodges to my piece, because that's what I feel like doing, and because hopefully it'll start to tie all of the elements in. I am going to pop that over there. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my darkest ink and I'm just going to run it around the edges. Now I've got archival inks here because once they're dry they are permanent. There's a clue in the name, isn't there? You could just as easily use a stays-on ink pad, and much as I love the smell, they dry out way too quickly for my liking, and I'm not too sure that they're actually very good for you to be inhaling the scent that comes off them. So hence my choice of archival inks rather than stays-on. But they will do, an archival ink will work just. Stays on will work just as well. And next, again, I'm going to add some extra details to this because I want to have a little bit more interest to my piece. And the original rice paper has sort of a flourish at the bottom of it. So I have a flourish stencil here that I quite like the look of. So I'm just going to pop this on. It doesn't have to fit completely. But I am going to use a spray temporary adhesive because otherwise this is quite a thin stencil. And it's quite easy to go underneath the surfaces, so that will do. And because I know that I am likely to spread paste where I don't want it, I've got a little bit of masking tape that I'm going to cover that piece with, so that, because I don't end up contaminating that part of that. And I'm choosing to use a combination of 2 different colour deluxe pastes. So I've got champagne and truffle, because I think these colours will work well for my project. And they need a jolly good stir because they have separated. These are slightly gritty paints but give a lovely, not overly bright metallic effect, but nonetheless a slightly metallic effect that is more in keeping with a vintage project. So let's give that one a good stir. I know I should have cleaned the brush first, but there you are. That can go into there. And let us find a stencil, a palette knife, so that can go out of the way. So now I'm just going to pick up some of my truffle paste and just put it over here. You can see it, you possibly hear how gritty it is, and you don't need very much. And I'm going to add different areas and hopefully mix them up a little bit. There we are. So it's not all a single flat colour. So that can go there. make sure I have covered it all, and hopefully I haven't squished it underneath. I've been quite careful to have my palette knife flat to it. I would then wait for one side to dry naturally and then come back and do each of the other sides one by one, rather than doing it all together, because as I say, if you're going to do a project like this, you want it to look nice at the end of the day. So taking the time to let it dry seems to me to be a good move. But I think we can see that what we get is a little bit of shimmer and areas that are gold and areas that are brown, and that will work in with the rest of my project. Okay, so I'm going to carefully pop that on its side and only do one side, and I'm going to add another layer of paint to this one. I don't think that my and there we are. I don't think that the top is quite ready for its next layer, but there we are. But we might as well use our time wisely, let each piece dry as we go. On the whole, products are better just air drying. Now in the UK in nice warm weather, that's easy on days like today, but clearly in the winter that maybe not be quite such a great thing. But there we are. So that's that side, and I'm going to hold that up, and I'm just going to do the other side, and then we'll have that, and we'll carry on and we'll do the bits as we can to you know, depending on how the time's going, we'll see how many sides we get done. But essentially it's repeating the process. So having shown you once, actually it's not a headache to not show every side being completed. I'm conscious that our evenings are very precious. There'll be people needing to get children to bed. If they aren't already in bed, there might be homework that's needing supervised. Or if it was anything like my children when they were young, there might be all-out war going on quietly in the background. So I think it is good not to spend every bit of our evenings here. So I'm just going to pop that down on the floor, out of the way, and return to our lid. Now, as I had a feeling was going to be the case, the initial primer paste has not dried completely. You know it's dry completely because part 1 crackling gel, because it goes clear, and when it's not dry enough it's white. So I'm just going to have to be careful with this, because if I get too close to it and it bubbles again, that's not the look you're looking for. So we'll just carry on and add this. Alright. And it's better to move the box around and go back and forth to areas rather than just concentrating on one area alone. So you can see here where I've added the text and where I've added the swatches from the stamp, and where I've covered the tops with a little bit of overhanging rice paper. I have lost some of my brown inking, so I will add that back in a minute, but you best not to add it straight in onto damp step one crackling gel, because otherwise it will just pull off everything. So let me just now add that back in to this edge, and again it will help disguise that edge where they are. It links the two together, covers up the edges, and links the sides to each other. So it's quite a good trick, is this one, for, you know, making things, covering up areas that are maybe a bit short of medium. So let's pop that over there for the moment. That over there. Now then. So the stage 2 transparent crackling gel. Now I tend to think of gels as paste and therefore they should be put on with, that'll be a palette knife. But actually, whilst you can put this on with a palette knife perfectly well, you end up with a very thick layer and you'll get huge cracks because how thick you put this second layer on really ultimately determines how big your cracks are. And so I don't particularly want huge cracks, and so I'm going to apply my step 2 with, and it'll take much longer to dry, and as I say, I would quite like it to dry in a reasonable amount of time, not take until 3 months on Sunday, because quite frankly we've all got enough to do without doing that. At home, on your own, creating for yourself, then actually it doesn't matter how thick you put it on, because you can walk away from it. And quite often I will do this step overnight, just walk away, leave it, and come back the following day, having let nature take its time. I craft in a conservatory, and in the winter I do find that actually I have to sometimes even wait longer because it's not heated overnight. But you know, we adapt to the environment that we're in, don't we? And that's the most important thing. So good. I hope everyone is okay. I can't see any questions going on, so if someone could let me know if they have got any questions. What's going on? The colour that I used for the box is actually mustard. It's probably one of the most muted of the colours in the new range. I haven't got all of them. I was sent by Pentart 2 or 3 colours, and I have to say my first thoughts were, oh, what on earth am I going to do with these? Because one of the colours was so bright that it really made me go, So, let me just grab some of the colours so you can see what I mean by just how vibrant they are. So, I was sent an orange. Let me just grab the orange as opposed to that one. There we are. So that was the colour I was sent, which is clearly bright orange. This one is sun yellow, and I have to say I think it's a beautiful colour, but very vibrant. We've got a day glow yellow, which is really yellow. But I think if you added an antiquing fluid to that, it will settle down. There is a absolutely beautiful, what I would call turquoise, but actually what Pentart are calling it emerald green. A lovely rich purple called eggplant, and a red which I actually think is more coral, or maybe certainly got a more pinky hue than a true red. There are other colours in the range, but you know, each to their own as to what they like and what they don't like. But I think you could do some beautiful rainbow coloured projects with them if you wanted to. Now then, we are going to have fun here, because that needs to move out of the way to dry a little bit. And this is going to get a little extra heat blast. We've got a reasonable amount of time, so that's good. So we can add a bit more stamping to the sides of this and go back through things. So just to remind everyone, one of the reasons that I am choosing the colours I've chosen the mustard yellow because I felt that it pulled out the colours in the background of my rice paper. And then I looked at my rice paper to see what additional details it had. And it had manuscript and some text, and also some scroll work. And I thought, how can I replicate that on the base of my box so that the top and the bottom become a cohesive piece. So there we are. So is that drying? Yes, that will go down. So I'm going to pop that up way. So I'm just going to add, whilst we're just actually giving that step 2 crackling gel a chance to work, to dry, or start drying naturally, I'm going to add the details with a text stamp. You can see I really am not being overtly fussy about how I add that. It really doesn't matter. It's more about an added layer of texture or interest in the background, rather than my project being a single piece with one tone. And there's my splodge stamp that I'm just going to add. First, second, third, you name it, generation stamping. That can go onto there. So I'll pop those stamps safely out of the way, and I should be able to get my deluxe paste dry relatively quickly. The thinner areas are dry. I suspect that bit, which I can see visually is a bit thicker, is not there. It's not dry enough for me to put it down, so I can add some stenciling to the next part of the box. So just bear with me while we do that. Let me have a little look and see what's going on. There we are. Lucky ladies, we've got lots of you watching, which is lovely to see. I'm glad that people are happy. Mary, don't worry about being late. It will be there for you to look back at, and we all have a life to get on with. That's the most important thing, isn't it? Is that we enjoy what we're doing. There are now so many lives on so many sites that actually it's really quite difficult to try and watch everything without sitting on your bottom all day. And heaven knows my bottom doesn't need me to be sitting on it any longer than necessary. It's quite wide enough. There we are. So that really does need a little bit more dry. So I can pop that to the side, and I will pick up my stencil again, and I can, thankfully, because of the glue I used, it'll be still gluable, and I lined it up with the bottom of my box last time, so I can do the same, give it a little push. There we are. And I can go back and add some of my beautiful paste. As I say, these are, they have a metallic hint, but they're not a true metallic, and it really is a very, very beautiful effect when you see it. So you see, I'm really not picking up large quantities, and one of the things with these mediums is that quite a lot of companies sell their products in sort of 50 or 60 ml pots, which is fine, but if you're going to use something a lot, it works out quite expensive. And Pentart sell their products in 100 ml pots, which I think is quite a generous size. And they're not stupidly priced. Obviously, what you spend your hard-earned monies on is entirely up to you. And I'm sure that there are other you could use any other stencil paste from any other company to do a very similar effect. It's just that I happen to like these because they work with my project. So that can go onto there. That can go down there. I'll give that a little wipe because it's now getting quite yucky. And that can go there. So that one can then have a little dry. And one of the things, again, I think that's worth mentioning is that whenever you're doing something like a box that's got a lid that clips over it, try and keep anything dimensional away from the top of the box, because otherwise when you try to fit the lid on, you'll suddenly find actually that you really haven't got any room and you can't get your box lid on. And the numbers of the times I've done that is untrue, but it's so hence the reason I think it's important to just make that comment that it's worth it. You know, just thinking about what you're doing with what you're adding. And at the moment it doesn't look edged, so I'm just going to do that. You can see what a difference just adding that brown line does. It sort of tells the eye that this is the project, as opposed to your eye falling off the edge of the project. I hope that makes sense from that point of view. So that's 2 sides of that done. That can sit and dry a little bit, and I'm going to break cardinal rules, and I'm not. I'll tell you what I'm going to do next whilst that is drying, is I'm going to add a layer of varnish to my rice paper, and that's because I'm going to add some stuff ultimately to show the crackles, and that means that if I don't have my rice paper fully protected, then what will happen is that instead of having pretty rice paper, I will have a very nice big dark brown splodge. So it's really important to seal your rice paper. And I know I sealed it with the decoupage varnish, but I still think it's worth the extra step. And actually, on a paranoid level, I will repeat. We'll dry this with my heat gun, and then we'll add a second layer of varnish. It will, as I say, once you've added an oil paint or a bitumen to the rice papers and it's absorbed into it, you can't get it out. So protecting it first to minimise, to stop that happening, is actually the only logical thing to do. And most of the guys who do lots of decoupage and vintage effects will say that they will always add 2 layers to make sure that they actually have covered every bit of their product. I'm using a water-based varnish because the products so far that I've used are not going to react with it, and it means I don't need to worry so much about how I'm going to get my brush dried. So I'm just going to dunk that into some water. I'm going to give this a little bit of a dry. It will heat the box up a bit, which will help with the drying of the transparent crackle gel as well. But my primary reason for doing this is so I can get a second layer of varnish onto the top of my box. And because it's a water-based varnish, it actually dries, and I put it on in a thin layer. It will dry quite quickly, doesn't need masses of time. I can touch that, it's not feeling tacky. So let me just lift my brush out of there, give it a dry, and I'm going to add another layer now to it. Okay, so I hope everyone is okay, and I can see that you're nicely chatting to each other. That's of course one of the joys that actually this whole pandemic has done, isn't it? It's brought us together. It's created a much more active online community with people who probably will never meet in person, actually able to connect with each other a long time. And hopefully when we can get back to maybe doing some retreats, we'll be able to meet up with some of our friends or our Facebook crafting friends in person. I'm sure that most of us will be very delighted to be able to get back to some sense of normality, although I think for many it might be a long time before we feel completely comfortable with what was going on. There we are, and hopefully I've now got 2 coats of varnish over everything and I haven't missed anything. But by doing it twice, you minimise the risk of doing that. It is a varnish. It will set dry and crispy if I just leave it, brush out of water, so it's going to go into water, but thankfully it doesn't need to go into white spirit or terp, so I'm not going to have a room that smells chemically, and again I think that's a good thing. And there we are. So Noreen, what don't you like the sound of, sweetheart? You can just let me know what you don't like the sound of. I've just seen your comment message. But I can't see the rest. Oh, housework. Yes, I can definitely understand the concept of not liking housework. Best left to the husband, I find. Though he's getting a bit old, and he's about 10, 11 years older than me, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to start doing an awful lot more. Now then, so I can see, but you probably can't, that I am getting cracks, and I'm going to just give this a little bit more of a helping hand. At least if I can get it touch dry, because we might know from past experience it's actually reasonably safe once the cracks are formed and it's touch dry to do the next step quite happily, and the white will disappear overnight, which is always a good thing. So I'm not worried if I've got some areas that are white, but what I don't want to do is cause my crackle paste to bubble, because that's definitely not a good effect. So, hi Joe. It's nice of you to join me. It's really lovely to see you here watching me. I'm still quite new to these, as you know. It's taken quite a lot of courage for me to pick up, to actually think that, okay, this is something I can do. I hope that following your accident that there is no serious harm, and that you're just maybe a bit battered and bruised and with a sore neck, rather than, and I'm not belittling that because I know that that's horrible, but that actually the car came out a lot worse than you did, because obviously any form of motor vehicle accident, no matter what's gone on, is not a great thing. So I'm going to let that cool down. So I can touch this and I'm not lifting stuff up. So I'm happy at this point that I can actually carry on. And there's 2 or 3 different things I can do now to bring out the crackles. I can use Sam Thompson's favourite product, the vintage antiquing paste. I could use liquid bitumen from either by Pentart or an entirely different one by Rich, or I could use a Lasur gel, which will sit nicely into the cracks, or I can add a product called Antique Paste. And you look at this and think, but that's a wax. And it is and it isn't, was what I would say. Is these are actually water-based, and so they'll wipe off. They'll sit into the cracks, whereas a wax applied to the top will stick on the top surface, and if you want to shift it, you then have to find some transparent wax to shift the excess off. That does work quite well, but I'd rather avoid it. So I've got Ioti saying that she likes the vintage paste, and so I don't have a preference as to which one I use. We could use either. I think because I'm working in a closed room, I'm going to go for the antique paste rather than the vintage paste, and I've chosen it in a brass bit. Yeah, I think it's a brass colour, probably. Let me look at the top. Yeah, brass. It comes. You can get it in white, a black pearl, gold, silver, and you think, well, that's just covered everything. And sure enough, it has just covered everything. But remember, I said it was a water-based product. So I can now grab a cloth and wipe off the top surface quite happily. And I don't know how well that's going to show, but I've got my cracks now filled with my paste and the surface back clear. Now again, because I've heat dried this and the surface will be top dry and the whole depth of it won't be, I know that actually more cracks are likely to develop overnight. And what I will do is, when I've completed the other sides of the box, and photograph it and include some close-ups, because that way you'll be able to see better the end result. So, because I think it might be, I don't know how easy is that, if that's focusing or not, but I think over here in particular you can see there's a reasonable amount of cracks appeared. So there we are. But I've protected everything. And if I was to try this just with an ordinary wax, like like a Finnabair wax, for example, then actually once it's on the surface it won't come off. Whereas because this is water-based, I can lift it really easily from the surface, and I can edge it and I can bring it into my top piece, but I can soften it so that the sides become continuous and shaded in. That is dry enough, so let's just add that little bit from there onto there. There we are. So there we are, and that can come off there. As I say, I have a feeling that it might be easier for you if I show it after, in close up. So I quite like this effect, and I can pull it in. Remember, I put my varnish on the top, so I can lift this, but actually I want it to come in at my edges. Just draw it in so that I'm edging the top, so the whole piece doesn't just look like I've taken that piece of rice paper and plonked it on the surface. It just makes it easier. Now you could, if you wanted to, add a fine line crackle to the surface of the top, but actually I think there's enough on here without doing that. So I've softened my edges, I've linked them round, and hopefully it's given a cohesive appearance from that. So there we are. So that is my box lid finished. When it's all dry, will add something called soft touch varnish to the top of that, purely because actually I like the feel of it. So let's pick up our box base. We're going to pop that in onto the top of here. So that is our box. Yes, I know I've got two sides to complete, but I don't need you to be here all night. If I turn that over, I've got my sides. I will add a varnish to the sides of these because I've got a shiny surface here and a matte surface here, and for me that's not sitting comfortably at the moment, but I'm not going to add it until that stencil paste is fully dry, because otherwise I will smudge it. So I hope that you've enjoyed that demonstration and that it's been helpful for you. I don't know that I want to do any more tonight. I think that I will finish the other sides in the fullness of time tomorrow, and then we'll take photographs and photograph the finer details so that you've got them all to see. But a simple technique, it's not difficult to do, and I think it's something that is highly achievable for people, if they're starting out with decoupage, because it doesn't require lots of feathering, it doesn't require lots of layering of papers. You're not trying to hide back edges, to give an illusion that the whole piece is there. It just gives you a completed piece relatively simply. So, have we got anything else? Thank you very much. Thank you, Lou, for those kind words. I have to say that I think I'm getting less nervous about doing them. It does involve a little bit of prep and thought as to how we're going to break big projects down, because, you know, if I was teaching this as a class, then actually what we would be doing would take 4 to 6 hours. So trying to condense it all down into a 1 hour live is a little bit of a challenge, shall we say. But I think it should have given everyone the basics of how to achieve it. And as I say, there are beautiful rice papers available from lots of different companies. Search out your favourite ones, because they cover all sorts of genres and they are such a versatile product. So I'm going to say goodbye for now. Take care, darlings, and stay safe, and hopefully I will see you virtually in another live when I'll be watching another live at some point over the weekend. And I am due to do another one live with you on the 23rd. Yeah, the 23rd. So if anyone's got any techniques that they would like to me to show, that you think I might know something about, then you could send me a message, or you could tag me in a comment on this page, and I'll see what I can do. Bye bye for now. Take care.